Good afternoon, America and the world. Today is November 11th, 2024. In Europe, today is called Remembrance Day. Here in America, we call it Veterans Day. I thank all of you who, like me, served in our armed forces in order to preserve the rights guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. You know, we live at a time when those very rights are being threatened. But at this moment, I salute you all. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God, our King. You are viewing Issues and Answers on the WCEG Network. I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. My goal is to enlighten your perspectives about our environment, our socio-political struggles, and those banes of classism and racism that make all of our lives more difficult than they should be. In so doing, our hope is to bring us all together in a human tapestry of brotherhood and sisterhood, bound together by threads of understanding, respect, and tolerance of our physical, racial, and religious differences. Hopefully, we can have a discussion of ideas based on facts, not fiction, that will encourage us to think critically and not emotionally. Let there be no doubt the voice of WCEG is in consort with those that ring with the harmonies of liberty. If you're currently watching, we thank you. Inform your neighbors, friends, and associates that we can be viewed live via YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and over streaming devices such as Roku. Our podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, and GL Savin, that's from India, platforms. All of our programs are archived on YouTube and can be viewed by anyone at any time. Please understand that the topics and opinions, especially today, on Issues and Answers are those of the host and my guest host, which we don't have today, and not the WCEG network. So let's get moving on this installment of Issues and Answers. Be warned now, and I will warn you later, that some of the language today may be a bit more coarse than you're used to hearing here on WCEG, and especially on my program, Issues and Answers. You know, I guess you'll find out that as we move along, that like a wordy Baptist preacher, this verbal essay will come together at the end. So hang in there with me. The title of today's installment is How Dare You? How Dare You? About 30 years ago, I watched for the first time the movie Cabin in the Sky. This movie, featuring predominantly African American actors, was made in 1943. To this very day, this movie remains a classic. But as I watched this movie, I could not help but shed a few tears. Not too proud to say that. The actors in this movie were superior. Unfortunately, as a child growing up in the 50s, I saw many of those actors only in African jungle themed television productions, such as Ramar of the Jungle or in Tarzan movies. None had main parts. They're all running around in loincloths. Racism kept them out of movies and television. Horrible. Racism kept them out of movies and television. And these were all stellar actors. About 15 years ago, I sat at my computer to bring up the words To Lift Every Voice and Sing by James Weldon Johnson and his brother Rosamond. Since childhood, I have sung that song many, many times. Many called it the Negro National Anthem or the Black National Anthem. It was never, get this, it was never meant to be any of these monikers. The song never mentions any race. Notice it says lift every voice. If you understand the words and the context in which it was written, this hymn is about inclusion and not exclusion. But what brought me to Cabin in the Sky Tears was the last verse of this hymn. It's never sung. I tried to include it at the end of many of my issues and answers broadcasts. Today, I want to recite it at the beginning. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. I began to recite this verse at my broadcast, and most of you don't know that, but I began to recite it in my broadcast after Trumpian bootlickers began protest Lift Every Voice and Sing at the beginning of National Football League games. They called it un-American. To all of these seemingly intelligent men and women, I ask you to compare the last verse of Lift Every Voice and Sing to the third verse of our national anthem. You tell me which sounds more patriotic, which sounds more American. How dare you besmirch this patriotic hymn? In January 2021, South Carolina Representative Jim Clyburn sponsored House Resolution 301, which was a bill that proposed that Lift Every Voice and Sing be designated as the national hymn of the United States. Think about it. Let me say that again. South Carolina Representative Jim Clyburn sponsored House Resolution 301, which was a bill that proposed that Lift Every Voice and Sing be designated as the national hymn. Does that sound like it's something exclusive to Black people? No, it does not. The Star-Spangled Banner would still have remained the national anthem. But in 2021, American patriotism was hijacked by imbeciles carrying the flag of the first insurrection, also known as the Civil War, which is a conflict in terms, but how can you have a civil war? And wearing T-shirts celebrating the Nazi Holocaust of World War II Germany. January 6, 2021 is the bookmark in American history that will signal a change in the civility and conscience of this country. January 6, 2021. That is important. To Donald Trump, the murderous vandals who attacked 140 police officers with the intent of killing congressional leaders and the vice president and the 147 they were killing the congressional leader and the vice president. The 147 legislators who supported Donald Trump and the vandals and their efforts to overturn an election they knew was free and fair, I say, How dare you? How dare you go against the Constitution of the United States of America in a fair and just election? And not only that, you, all of you, who proudly talk about you back the blue, said nothing about the 140 police officers who were injured. 5 died as a result of what happened on that day of American infamy, orchestrated by then President Donald Trump. Warning: the language in this edition of Issues and Answers will be graphic and profane quotes from leaders of this country. Excuse me while I get a wig here. Hot language, hot words that deserve to be quenched. Despite what you have heard, despite what is popular, despite this new but erroneous tradition, slavery did not end on June 19th, 1865. I know you heard me tell you about this before, but hardly any of you are listening because you're caught up in tradition, even if the tradition is wrong. I'll talk more about tradition later. That was the date the Emancipation Proclamation reached Galveston, Texas. The Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order by Abraham Lincoln. You may not know history, but you should know from current events that executive orders are temporary and not law. The Emancipation Proclamation affected only those enslaved in the states of the rebellion, or we call them Confederate States of the South and the West. Okay, get this, all you geniuses out there who give this bad stuff about June 19th. The Emancipation Proclamation had no effect on slavery in the states under Union control in the North. So stop quoting that nonsense about the Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery on June 19th. It is absolutely wrong. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April 17th, 1865. Now, my geniuses, listen to me. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States was ratified on December 6, 1865. Let me repeat that because some of you are thick-headed. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States was ratified on December 6, 1865. That law freed all involuntary servitude, that meant slavery, in Section 1, and in Section 2 gave Congress the authority to enforce it. How dare you promote a lie that slavery ended on June 19th, 1865, when a 2-minute search of American history reveals that that is a lie. But in our world, a lie repeated over and over becomes truth. That is very similar to the lie that Jews killed Jesus when they had no political power while under the rule of Rome. In order to seek Christian converts, for those of you who don't know history, the Roman Empire, in order to seek Christian converts, the narrative had to be changed from blaming Pontius Pilate, who was a ruthless, brutal leader, to blaming Jews. Let me tell you something, a little aside here. Pontius Pilate was so brutal. Now, we know how brutal the Roman Empire was, but Pontius Pilate was so brutal that the leaders in Rome removed him from Judea, removed him from Palestine. He was that brutal. So why would he stand before somebody and go, oh, I don't know whether I really want to kill this guy or not. He hasn't done nothing. He cared nothing about Jews. He cared nothing about crucifying anybody who was Jewish, especially someone Jewish who was a threat or he viewed as a threat to Rome. Now, the consequence of altering history, and I know some of you don't believe that the Bible was altered, but it is. All you have to do is go one semester in any decent seminary school, and they will tell you that. The consequence of that altering of history, excuse me, allowed for a series of pogroms, inquisitions, and the Nazi Holocaust before and during World War II. We live with that today in the flood of anti-Semitism that is preached in churches and practiced on our streets. That simple, convenient altering has resulted in the murder and injuring of millions of people simply because of their heritage. How dare you continue that legacy? How dare you? But let's get back to slavery and its results that last until this very day. First, let's be aware that slavery was not confined to America. Every industrialized country in the world used African slaves. Africans were looked upon as less than human. They were considered just a step above monkeys. Just as wild horses, they had to be broken and tamed. You break people by destroying their dignity, by sexually abusing both men and women, referring to them as subhuman with names like darky and nigger, beating them into submission, and murdering those who could not be broken. Then displaying those broken and dead bodies as an example for others. Now, this is just what the Romans did for crucifixions. Despite what you have read in the Bible or what you believe, crucified bodies were left on crosses so that the bodies could be eaten by insects and birds before the decomposed bodies were removed. That is exactly what happened to hung slaves. They hung there for days. Now, dehumanizing humans to the point where you can abuse them is a process. Is a process. You can justify this. You can justify this, excuse me, by looking at them as niggers, excuse me, bitches. Once you accomplish that, the rest is easy. That is why soldiers are conditioned to look at the enemy, excuse me, and dehumanizing terms such as chinks, krauts, gooks, or redskins. Think about that as we move on. But how dare you remain stuck on that type of stupidity in the 21st century? Yet too many of you, especially young Black men, are shackled to that despicable nonsense, even while it works to your detriment. You younger generation Black men and women, embrace dehumanizing yourselves to the point that it has become a reality for the world. You enjoy calling yourself niggas, that's with a Z, bitches, and hoes. You enjoy it so much that you spend billions of dollars to watch actors and comedians such as Terrence Howard, Don Cheadle, Eddie Murphy, Eddie Griffin, Chris Rock, and a host of others reinforce that concept of yourself that originated with slave masters. You even embrace branding yourselves with hot irons. Of course, you go to college to learn that, especially HBCUs. Just the way slave masters treated their ancestors, your ancestors, just like sheep and cattle. You have embraced self-hatred. Let me quote from Richard Pryor. Some of you use Richard Pryor. Some comedians say, oh, yeah, he was the father of modern comedy. And especially your Black comedians, you use him as justification for the garbage that comes out of your mouth during your comedic routines. Richard Pryor said this: I ain't ever going to call another Black man nigger, you know, because we never was no niggers. That's a word that's used to describe our own wretchedness, and we perpetuate it now because it's dead. That word's dead. We men and women, we come from we come from the first people on earth. You know, the first people on earth were Black people. I don't want them hip white people coming up to me calling me no nigger or telling me nigger jokes. I don't like it. I'm just telling you, it's uncomfortable to me. I don't like it when Black people say it to me. I really don't know more. It's nothing. It don't mean nothing. That's Richard Pryor, who you guys consider yourself modeling yourself after every time you laugh when somebody calls you a nigger, when a Black man calls you a nigger, or a Black woman calls you a nigger. Just remember the fake outrage you had on November 17th, 2006, at a comedy show at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, California, when white comedian Michael Richards, who you may know was one of the stars on the series Seinfeld, responded to a persistent heckler by calling him nigger. You would have laughed if Richard Pryor or Eddie Griffin said it, but now you decide to get angry. Richard Pryor was smart enough to see this, and that is why he decided to stop using that word in his performances. How dare you continue to use it in your music and your daily lives while such dehumanizing mollifies that horrendous numbers of Blacks killed by Blacks each day. Tell Chris Rock that even the worst of us are not niggers. Words have consequences. Words determine mindsets. When you justify looking at your neighbors, your frat brothers, your sorority sisters, your homies, and even yourself as less than human, you have a built-in tolerance for others looking at you the same way, just as Michael Richards did. Let me go off track a little bit. I want to talk about women's suffrage. But it's going to all come together. Trust me. On August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution was ratified. It took 100 years of protest and arm twisting to get this ratified. This amendment gave women the right to vote. Amazing, isn't it? Here in the land of the free and the home of the brave, women had no voice in decisions that affected their very lives. Sound familiar? The subjugation of women placed them just a step above slaves. In fact, women could not take out loans by themselves or have credit cards in their names until the 1970s. People were stuck on that biblical pseudepigraphic book of Paul. Pseudepigraphic means others wrote it and used his name. Paul didn't write it. Books such as 1 Timothy 4, 1 Timothy 4th chapter, verses 11 to 12. Let me read that for you. Let a woman receive training in a quiet demeanor with complete respect for order, but do not allow a woman to train or dictate to a man, but to be in quiet demeanor. Otherwise, be humble, closed-mouthed, and subject to men, even if they don't want it. Sound familiar? Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. In case you don't remember who that is, I'll give you 3 seconds to look it up. This weekend, I posted on Facebook this question. Does anyone remember what AQ means? I posed this question to the public. There were no responses. In the late 1960s, when Black men and women developed a newfound pride in themselves and their culture, we began to refer to Black women as AQs. That was the abbreviation for Afro Queens. That engendered a mindset. Remember I said that words have consequences? Words have set a mindset. That engendered a mindset about how we looked at our women. They were to be honored. They were to be respected. Remembering how they were treated by slave masters, they were to be protected. That faded away. Warning, language warning, but we're keeping this program real. That faded away with the rap generation and its super sperm, niggas with attitude, bitches, hoes, and made fuck and motherfucker as common as ands and butts. Not only was a language denigrated, but a culture was denigrated. All the decades of building a sense of pride and self-worth were destroyed by white corporate pragmatists who traded the inclusivity of rock and roll for culturally demeaning rap music. Rap artists such as Ice-T, cop killer, Snoop Dogg, an accused murderer, Queen Latifah, and MC Lyte became modern tools for promoting murder in the Black communities and looking at one's neighbor as less than human. That set a mindset for both Blacks and racist whites. How dare you trample on a culture and popularize rape, murder, and mayhem. Words have consequences. What happened to our Afro queens? What happened to our Afro queens? Kamala Harris. Let's talk about her. Doctor of Law, San Francisco prosecuting attorney, District Attorney of San Francisco from 2004 to 2011, Attorney General of California, 2011 to 2017, California U.S. Senator, 2017 to 2021, Vice President of the United States, Vice President of the United States from 2021 until the present. Truly, the beneficiary of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution freeing slaves, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution honoring women's suffrage and codifying their right to vote, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Her presidency was a victory for all women, regardless of race, creed, or culture. Her vice presidency was a victory for all women, regardless of race, creed, or culture. Surely, she was a modern day Afro queen, honored, respected, and protected. Not really. Not really. Former president and first African American president, Barack Obama, who really does not like to engage in political campaigns, spoke to customers in an African American barbershop in support of Vice President Kamala Harris. Nationwide polling indicated that Vice President Harris was not polling well among young Black men. These are the same Black men who embrace calling themselves niggas and their women hoes and bitches. These young men had no pride in themselves, their history, and their women. For them, there were no Afro queens. Women are just objects for their super sperm. President Obama chastised them for their years of looking at women as beings that should be closed-mouthed, humble, and never in leadership, especially Black women. These men masked their embarrassment with anger. How dare you, Mr. First Black President of the United States of America, chastise us publicly for being misogynist, just as we abhor being chastised for our silence about Black on Black crime. We abhor you for exposing the flaw in our humanity. We don't respect women in authority, but why must you put us on national blast? How dare you? Amazing. An accomplished lawyer and a government official elected by millions is someone you cannot support. That is a mindset for you and sets a mindset for others. Now think about this. Neither David Duke nor George Wallace would stand in a public forum and call a Black woman a cunt. No decent politician running for any office would publicly characterize a female opponent as born dumb, lazy, or in Kamala Harris's case, a shit vice president, while bragging about the size of a dead man's penis. But you, young Americans of all races, thought that such language typified the character of someone you wanted to lead us through peace, war, and future pandemics. How dare you? How dare you? This is abhorrent. You would think that at least one of those seated in that barbershop would have remembered and uttered the words of attorney Joseph Welch at the infamous McCarthy hearings of the 1950s. He said, "Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last?" End quote. But that did not happen. Just as the Greeks of old, your method was to slay the messenger of the bad news. The bad news was that you will support a man who calls one of the more accomplished women in American history a cunt, born dumb, a shit vice president. But don't feel like the Lone Ranger. You're not alone. Those fake Christians, formerly known as the Bible Belt and now known as the evangelicals, believe the same as you. Just keep in mind that the old Bible Belt was filled with Dixiecrats, supported by the KKK, segregation, and hated Jews and blacks. Today, under their new name, they support Donald Trump, the KKK, segregation, and hate Jews and blacks. You really picked a great side to be on. It's called self-hatred. It's called self-hatred. You can't look at yourself and feel proud. You can't look at your woman and feel proud because you're stuck on calling them bitches and hoes. It says a lot about you, young black men. It says a lot about you. Now, how about that third verse of the national anthem that I spoke of at the beginning? A portion of this deals with the fact that escaped slaves were promised freedom if they fought with the British during the War of 1812. Let me say that again. People without hope, people who could only see a future for themselves and their family as slaves, decided to fight with the British in order to be free. Think about that. It's during the War of 1812. So here is that third verse of the national anthem. And where is that band who so vauntedly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps' pollution. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free, the home of the brave. This should make you shed cabin in the sky tears. In the land of the free and the home of the brave, hunting down humans, escaping slavery, and shedding their blood was considered the American thing to do. Whether on the Trail of Tears, Wounded Knee, Rosewood, Mississippi, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wilmington, North Carolina, or Minneapolis, Minnesota, we can see that born dumb niggers, bitches, and redskins still haunt the American psyche. Women are still second class. Let's not forget Hillary Clinton. It ain't just black women, so stop segregating yourselves in misery. There is strength in numbers. There is strength in numbers. This is why people try to keep black people separated. This is why people try to keep women separated. This is why Black politicians only talk to poor Black people, and white politicians ignore poor white people completely. They do. And if you ever wanted to get a poor people's campaign going, you can't just talk to Black people in the ghetto. You got to go to Appalachia. You got to convince them too, because you see, the power structure keeps them ignorant of who they are. Yes, they do. You know, there's an American saying, it's attributed to many, which says, when fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross. When fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross. Niccolo Machiavelli, author of The Prince, stated centuries ago, one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. One who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. That was true in pre-World War II Germany. And sadly, it's true here in present day America. Those who allow themselves to be deceived. So wake up. A lesson is being taught to you at this very moment. Either you pay attention and resolve to be a critical thinker and an intentional doer of right for humanity rather than for an individual, or be fickle-minded and destined to fight battles that should have been won long ago, except for your apathy and indifference to others' humanity. Will you dare to pay attention? Will you dare to look into your mirror and accurately perceive your humanity, your dignity, and your integrity? If not, how dare you? How dare you? Thank you for joining me on this closing season of Issues and Answers with Norman A. Carter Jr. on the WCEG Network. I hope to be seeing all of you, after the first of the year, where we're going to be getting into new things, current things, and hopefully getting into your head, because we at WCEG believe in speaking life to the community, a worldwide community. Thank you again. Have a great holiday season, everyone. We love you. We'll be back on January 13th, 2025. Sparkling, and I might have the same amount of hair or less. I hope. Take care, y'all. Peace out.